The hospital corridors always felt longer at night. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the rhythmic beeping of machines, the muffled cries from distant rooms, they all blended into one lonely heartbeat that followed Lydia Warren everywhere. She had spent 34 years in these walls, comforting strangers, stitching wounds, holding hands that would soon go cold. Yet when her shift ended, she returned to a house that had grown too quiet, too still since her husband's death 3 years ago. The silence was what hurt most. It wasn't just the absence of his voice, it was the echo of everything unsaid. Most nights, Lydia sat at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, her phone lighting the space more than the dim lamp ever could. That's where he appeared, in a chat box that had started with a simple message months earlier. "Daniel, you must be exhausted saving lives all night. I'm just glad someone like you still exists." At first, she ignored it. Men sent strange messages all the time. But Daniel's tone wasn't like the others. He was gentle, almost poetic. He asked about her patients, her favorite books, and whether she still dreamed of the ocean she used to visit as a child. Every night after that, he was there, texting her as if he knew exactly when her shift ended. He never asked for pictures right away. He said he wanted to see her through her words first. No one had ever said that to Lydia before. Soon, she began to wait for his messages more than she waited for sleep. They shared stories about loss. His wife had supposedly died in a car crash. Lydia believed him. The grief in his words sounded too real to fake. "Lydia, sometimes I feel guilty for still being here when he's not." "Daniel, don't. You deserve a second chapter, Lydia. Maybe that's what I'm here for." She smiled at the screen, heart fluttering like she was 20 again. For the first time in years, she bought a new dress. Just in case he ever asked for a video call, though he never did. "Bad connection," he'd say. "Cracked camera." Each excuse slid past her reasoning because she needed to believe him. The narration deepened each night, stories about his cabin in Colorado, the smell of pine outside his window, his promise that one day she'd see it too. Lydia started imagining herself there, walking along the wooden porch, hearing him laugh behind her, touching the life she thought she'd lost. But sometimes, in the blue light of her phone, she'd catch herself wondering, why doesn't he ever call me by my full name? When she'd mention her hospital, he'd change the subject. Once, when she hinted about a video chat, his reply came delayed. "Daniel, don't you trust me yet?" The word stung. She had been so careful all her life, a woman of order and boundaries. But loneliness has a way of softening reason. So she apologized, typing fast, wanting to fix whatever she'd broken. Nights blurred into weeks. Daniel's messages became the pulse of her evenings. When he sent her a picture, a man in his early 50s, gray hair, kind eyes, she saved it to her gallery. She even printed it, sliding it into a photo frame beside her husband's. It was the first time she'd let herself feel something close to love again. One cold Thursday, after another long shift, she opened her phone and found a new message. "Daniel, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we meet. What do you say?" Her heart skipped. She stared at the blinking cursor, her hands trembling. Outside, the rain tapped against the window like soft fingertips. Inside, Lydia typed a single word that would change everything. "Yes." She pressed send before doubt could stop her. And for the first time in years, the silence in her house didn't feel empty. It felt like anticipation. The morning Lydia booked her flight, the sun hadn't yet risen over the pines behind her house. Her fingers shook as she entered her credit card number, a mix of fear and thrill bubbling in her chest. Denver, Colorado. The name alone felt like a promise. Daniel had written the night before, his message filled with excitement and tenderness. "Daniel, I can't believe this is real, Lydia. After all this time, I finally get to hold you." She had read it 10 times before whispering the words out loud to herself. They sounded foreign, hold you, as if she'd stumbled into someone else's story. That morning, she told her friend and fellow nurse, Maria, about her plans. They were in the hospital break room, the stale scent of coffee lingering between them. "Maria, you're flying out to meet a man you've never seen on video?" "Lydia, he's different, Maria. You'd understand if you read what he writes to me." Maria, Lydia, I'm just worried. Please, promise me you'll share your location. At least that. Lydia promised. She even smiled, though her chest tightened with guilt. Maria didn't know that Daniel had asked her not to tell anyone yet, just until we make it official, he'd said. It was romantic, secretive, thrilling in a way that made her feel alive again. 2 days later, she packed a small suitcase, a floral blouse, her favorite perfume, a book of poetry Daniel had mentioned once. As she zipped it shut, her wedding ring clinked against the handle. She still wore it out of habit. For the first time, she slipped it off and placed it on the dresser beside her husband's photo. "You'd want me to be happy again," she whispered to the frame, convincing herself it was true. At the airport, the world felt bigger than she remembered. Crowds, voices, wheels rolling across tile. She hadn't flown in over a decade. As the plane lifted, Lydia pressed her hand against the window, watching Oregon shrink beneath clouds like scattered cotton. Her heart raced with hope, with fear, with the ache of a woman who wanted to believe in something beautiful again. She replayed Daniel's voice messages in her head, the deep, slow rhythm, the faint echo that made it sound like he was speaking from a large room. She told herself it was normal. She told herself he was real. When the plane touched down in Denver, her phone buzzed instantly. "Daniel, I'm here. Can't wait to see you, beautiful." Her stomach fluttered. She walked quickly through the terminal, scanning every face that passed. The man with the bouquet of roses couldn't be him, nor the one with a cowboy hat and tired eyes. Then she saw him, a tall man waving from near the exit, holding a sign with her name scribbled in blue marker. But something was wrong. The face wasn't the same as the photos she'd memorized. He was older, heavier, his hair thinner and streaked with gray. Still, he smiled with a confidence that froze her in place. "Lydia," he called out, walking toward her. "It's me, Daniel." For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The air in the terminal thickened. Every warning Maria had given her flashed in her mind, but when he hugged her, she didn't resist. His arms were strong, too firm. "You're even more beautiful in person," he said softly, his breath brushing her ear. Her voice trembled. "You look different from your pictures." He chuckled, low and dismissive. "Old photo. I didn't want to scare you off with my wrinkles." He took her suitcase before she could answer. His hand closed around hers as they walked toward the parking lot, his grip tightening just slightly, enough to remind her she wasn't going anywhere else. Outside, the Colorado air was sharp and cold. The sky dimmed as clouds rolled in, turning the day gray. Lydia followed him silently, her heart whispering a single thought she refused to say aloud. Something isn't right. The ride from the airport began in silence. Lydia sat in the passenger seat, her purse clutched tight on her lap. The man beside her, Daniel, or whoever he truly was, hummed along to a country song on the radio, his hand occasionally brushing the gearshift with forced calm. Outside, the Colorado skyline blurred into open roads and pale fields. She'd imagined this moment so many times. Laughter, warmth, the kind of connection that made loneliness dissolve. But now, the air between them felt heavy, metallic. "You're quiet," he said finally, glancing at her. "I'm just tired from the flight. I figured. You'll feel better once we get home." That word, home, made her chest tighten. He hadn't mentioned any hotel. She assumed they'd meet somewhere public, maybe a coffee shop, but when she asked, he smiled, that same wrong smile from the airport, stretched too wide, eyes too dark. "I thought we'd spend a night at my place first," he said. "You'll love it. Quiet, private, just us." Private. The word echoed inside her skull. She turned to the window, pretending to admire the snow-dusted fields while her mind screamed no. But she didn't want to upset him. Not yet. The drive lasted nearly an hour. His house sat at the edge of a wooded road, a one-story cabin with peeling paint, surrounded by bare trees that looked like reaching hands. Lydia hesitated at the door. Something smelled faintly of gasoline and mildew. Inside, the walls were lined with old hunting photos, men holding rifles, deer strung up in the background. A single couch sat before a flickering TV. It wasn't what she'd imagined when he described his modern cabin. "It's cozy, huh?" he said, tossing her suitcase onto the couch. It's different than I pictured. Yeah, I did some remodeling. He winked, but the gesture felt empty. She forced a smile, her pulse thudding in her throat. The evening crept on. He poured them each a glass of wine, insisting she drink. She took a few sips out of politeness, setting it down when he looked away. He talked for hours, about politics, his job in logistics, his hatred for fake women online. His words carried sharp edges. So many liars out there, he muttered. You can't trust anyone these days. I suppose not, she whispered. But you're different. You're real. His hand found her knee. Lydia froze. The warmth of his skin burned through her jeans, a silent warning. She tried to laugh it off, standing abruptly to fetch her bag. I should check into a hotel before it gets too late. No, he interrupted softly. You'll stay. You said you wanted to see my world. You're here now. The tone of his voice changed, no longer charming, but commanding. Her mouth went dry. He smiled again, that same counterfeit expression that didn't reach his eyes. Don't you trust me, Lydia? She hesitated. I do. The lie tasted bitter. Night fell quickly. Snow began to drift outside, the sound of wind scraping against the window panes. Lydia sat rigid on the couch, pretending to read the messages he'd once sent her. They looked different now, hollow, rehearsed. In the flicker of the TV light, she studied his face. The shape of his jaw, the scar near his temple, the way his smile disappeared when he thought she wasn't watching. That's not the man from the photo. He caught her staring. What's wrong? Nothing, she said quickly. Just tired. Then you should rest. He stood, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. She heard the click of a lock from down the hall, though she couldn't tell which door it was. Her heart pounded. When he returned, he handed her a folded blanket and gestured toward the couch. You can sleep here tonight. Safer than the guest room. The window latch broke. She nodded, eyes down. He lingered for a long moment, staring at her like he was memorizing something. Then he whispered almost kindly, Good night, Lydia. I've waited a long time for this. The floor creaked as he walked away. Somewhere, another lock clicked shut. Lydia sat motionless in the dim glow of the TV, her hands trembling under the blanket. The snow outside had turned into a storm. She reached for her phone, but it wasn't where she'd left it. Her throat tightened. He has it. The house was quieter than any hospital ward Lydia had ever walked through, yet the silence felt louder. She sat on the couch where he'd left her, staring at the blank television screen that reflected her own pale face. The storm outside clawed at the windows, snow swirling like ash in the dark. Her phone was gone. She searched the cushions, the floor, even her suitcase. Nothing. The emptiness in her pocket told her more than words ever could. He had taken it. From down the hallway came the muffled sound of running water. A shower. She thought of the locked doors she'd heard earlier. Panic whispered, You need to leave now. Lydia rose quietly, her legs trembling. The old floor groaned beneath her weight as she crept to the front door. She twisted the knob. It didn't budge. A deadbolt she hadn't noticed before glimmered under the faint porch light. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Come on, she muttered, tugging harder. Nothing. The kitchen window was her next hope. She slid her fingers under the latch, but it too had been screwed shut. A nail caught her skin, drawing a small bead of blood that ran down her wrist. You all right in there? His voice came from the hall, casual, almost cheerful. Lydia froze. He stepped into the room wearing a gray t-shirt, hair damp, eyes sharp. You should have told me you wander at night, he said, smiling faintly. These floors can be dangerous. I was just looking for the bathroom. You passed it. He moved closer, his bare feet silent on the wood. She could smell soap mixed with something metallic, maybe rust, maybe blood. He took her wrist gently, inspecting the small cut. See? Already hurting yourself. You need to relax. Lydia nodded, forcing a weak laugh. Guess I'm clumsy. He didn't let go immediately. When he finally did, she felt the chill of the air rush back between them. Go lie down, he said softly. Tomorrow, I'll make us breakfast. You'll feel different once you've rested. She obeyed, moving to the couch again, heart hammering. He disappeared down the hallway, but she didn't hear another door open or close. Only the faint scrape of metal, the unmistakable sound of a lock turning. Minutes stretched into hours. Lydia stared at the ceiling, counting each creak of the old house. She remembered Maria's warning, her husband's pictures still on the dresser at home, her quiet life that suddenly felt like paradise compared to this. She thought of the messages, all those tender words that now sounded like bait. "You deserve a second chapter," he'd written. She almost laughed at the cruelty of it. Wind howled through the chimney, making the whole cabin tremble. Somewhere behind the locked door, his footsteps shifted. Then silence again. Lydia slipped from the couch, bare feet touching the cold floor. She tiptoed to the back of the house, where she'd glimpsed a sliding door earlier. The curtains were drawn tight, but she could see faint moonlight seeping through. She tugged the handle. It rattled, chained from the outside. A sob rose in her throat, but she bit it back. Crying would wake him. She sank to her knees, shaking, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. Outside, snow covered everything like a burial sheet. "Think," she whispered. "You've survived worse. Think." Her training as a nurse had taught her calm under pressure, patients bleeding out, alarms blaring, death inches away. But this was different. This was her life. Footsteps again. Closer this time. She scrambled to the couch and threw the blanket over herself just as the hallway light flicked on. He stood there, watching her, the faint outline of a keyring glinting in his hand. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Just resting my eyes." "Good," he said. "Tomorrow will be better. We'll get to know each other properly." He turned the key in the front door again, a slow, deliberate twist. Then the light clicked off. Lydia lay frozen beneath the blanket, eyes wide open, listening to the final sound before sleep refused her completely. The echo of the lock sliding shut. The clock on the wall ticked softly, but to Lydia, each second sounded like a hammer. She lay on the couch, wide-eyed under the blanket, pretending to sleep while the darkness around her pulsed with threat. The house creaked with the weight of snow, the storm outside muffling every sound except her heartbeat. She didn't know how long she'd been lying there before she heard the footsteps again, slow, steady, approaching from the hallway. Her muscles tightened. She kept her breathing shallow, hoping he'd think she was asleep. The footsteps stopped right behind her. A shadow fell across her face. "You're awake, aren't you?" His voice was low, almost kind, but it carried something poisonous underneath. Lydia's eyes stayed closed. The blanket trembled as his hand rested on her shoulder. "I can tell when someone's pretending." He sat down beside her, the couch sinking under his weight. She could smell the alcohol on his breath, sharp and sour. "You don't trust me yet," he murmured. "That hurts, Lydia. After everything we've shared." She opened her eyes slowly, heart racing. I don't know you like I thought I did." He smiled in the dark. "Then let me show you who I really am." His hand moved from her shoulder to her hair. She tried to sit up, but his other arm caught her, pulling her back down. Panic surged through her chest. "Daniel, please." "Don't call me that," he hissed. "That name isn't real." The confession sliced through the room. Her mind blurred. Then who was he? Before she could speak again, his grip tightened. The next moments unfolded in a blur of struggle, whispers, and muffled cries. She tried to push him away, but he was stronger, his weight pressing the air from her lungs, his voice whispering lies in her ear. "You wanted this. You came all this way for me." The world around her fractured. The storm outside grew louder, wind slamming against the glass, as if the earth itself was trying to drown out the horror. Lydia's mind left her body. She focused on a single crack in the ceiling, the way it curved like a river, something distant, something that wasn't happening here. When it was over, he stood and buttoned his shirt, not looking at her. "You'll understand in time," he said calmly, as though explaining a rule. "Love isn't always gentle. Sometimes it has to hurt first." He picked up her phone from the table, glanced at it, then slipped it into his pocket. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll start fresh." The door closed behind him with a dull thud. Lydia lay still for what felt like hours. The pain in her body was sharp, but the numbness in her mind was worse, a hollow ringing that made everything unreal. She stared at the ceiling again, tears sliding silently into her hair. At some point she stood. The air was cold, and her knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself toward the bathroom. The mirror reflected a face she didn't recognize, eyes red, lips swollen, a faint handprint blooming across her neck. "This isn't me," she whispered. She turned on the sink, letting water run over her shaking hands. Then she saw it, something glinting near the drain. A small metal hairpin she'd used earlier that day. She picked it up, holding it tight. Hope flickered, weak but alive. Back in the living room, she sat on the couch again, blanket pulled around her, pretending to rest. But her mind was already working. The locks, the back door, the window screws. There had to be a way out. In the silence, she heard him moving in the other room, the clink of a bottle, then the sound of heavy breathing that turned into snores. He was asleep. She waited longer, counting each breath until they grew steady. Then she rose, her bare feet silent against the floor. The moonlight cut through the curtains, silvering the edges of the room. She knelt by the front door, hairpin trembling in her fingers. The lock was old, stiff, corroded. She worked carefully, every creak of metal sounding deafening in her ears. Outside, the storm had calmed. The world waited. Just as the bolt began to shift, a floorboard creaked behind her. Lydia froze. "What are you doing?" His voice wasn't a shout, it was worse. "So, come awake." Her heart stopped. Lydia froze at the sound of his voice. Her hands still gripped the hairpin, half turned in the lock. The cold draft from the door brushed her face, and for one dizzying moment, she thought about bolting anyway, just running, barefoot, screaming into the dark. But she didn't move. She couldn't. Behind her, Daniel's shadow swelled across the floor, stretching closer. "I asked you a question," he said quietly. His calmness terrified her more than if he'd shouted. She turned slowly, forcing her shaking voice to sound normal. "I was checking the door," she whispered. "It rattled from the wind." He stared at her for a long, unbearable second. The silence pressed down like weight. Then, to her relief, he smiled, small, controlled, but deadly. "You're lying," he said simply. He took a step forward. Lydia's back hit the door. The hairpin slipped from her fingers, clinking to the floor between them. Daniel's gaze dropped to it, and his smile vanished. "I told you," he murmured, bending down. "Trust is everything." When he straightened, she saw the rage flicker in his eyes, brief but blinding. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist so hard she gasped. "You were going to leave me." No, I wasn't." "You were." His voice cracked, suddenly raw. "After everything I've done for you." She didn't respond. She couldn't. The pressure of his grip was cutting into her skin. Then, as if something inside him snapped, he threw her hand away and stormed toward the kitchen. She stumbled backward, clutching her wrist, heart hammering. She heard the drawer open, the sharp scrape of metal against wood. A knife. Lydia didn't wait to see. She turned and bolted down the hallway. The house was dark except for the thin ribbon of moonlight bleeding through the curtains. She ran into the guest room, slammed the door, and pressed her weight against it. Her breath came in ragged bursts. The window. She rushed to it, fingers fumbling with the latch. It was painted shut, stubborn and cold. Behind her, she heard his footsteps again, unhurried this time. He was enjoying it, the hunt, the fear. "You can't hide, Lydia," he called softly. "Not from me." Her pulse thudded in her ears. She grabbed a small porcelain lamp from the bedside table and smashed it against the window. The sound shattered the quiet like a gunshot. Cold air rushed in, glass splintering across the floor. "Stop," he roared from the hall. But she was already climbing through, her hands slicing on the shards. The cold night air bit her skin, the snow stinging like needles. She fell hard into the drift outside, pain shooting through her knees. She scrambled up, slipping, breath clouding in the dark. The forest loomed behind the house, black, endless, merciless. She ran toward it, her thin nightgown whipping in the wind. Behind her, the door crashed open. "Lydia!" His voice tore through the night. She didn't look back. The snow crunched beneath her feet, branches clawing at her arms as she plunged deeper into the trees. Every sound, her breath, her heartbeat, the snap of twigs, seemed too loud. She needed silence. Complete silence. She ducked behind a fallen log, pressing herself into the frozen earth. The forest swallowed her whole. Then she heard it, the faint crunch of his boots in the snow. He was searching, moving slowly, methodically. A beam of light flickered through the trees, his flashlight. It passed dangerously close, sweeping over the trunk just inches from her face. She bit her lip to keep from sobbing. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. "You can't survive out here," he called softly, his voice echoing between the trees. "Come back and I'll forgive you. We'll start again." The beam of light shifted away. His footsteps faded. Then, silence. She didn't move for a long time, afraid it was a trick. Finally, she crawled out, her body trembling violently. Her breath fogged the air. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. She looked toward the faint glow of the house, far behind her now, then toward the black stretch of forest ahead. The choice wasn't really a choice. She turned and started walking. Each step crunched softly, carefully. No more running. Only silence. And as the wind died down, Lydia realized that the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was freedom whispering. The hum of the fluorescent lights felt louder than her own heartbeat. Lydia sat motionless on the cold metal chair, hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee that had long gone cold. Her reflection glared faintly back at her from the silver table, pale, bruised, eyes hollow from days without sleep. She had made it out of the forest alive. That part was true. But survival didn't feel like victory. Not when she was now trapped again, this time in the white-walled stillness of an interrogation room. The detective across from her watched in silence. His badge read Detective Rowan. Middle-aged, tired eyes, a face that had seen too many stories like hers. "Take your time," he said softly. "We just need to understand what happened out there." She nodded but said nothing. Her throat was raw, her mind replaying the sound of branches breaking under her feet, the echo of Daniel's voice in the woods. Rowan leaned forward slightly. "You said he kept you there for how many days?" "3, she whispered. "Maybe 4. I lost track." "And during that time he hurt you?" Her fingers trembled around the cup. She didn't answer, but the silence spoke for her. The detective's eyes softened, yet his pen didn't stop moving. A clock ticked somewhere in the corner. Lydia's gaze drifted to the small camera mounted above the door, the red light blinking steadily. "They're watching me," she thought. "Recording everything." "Lydia," Rowan said gently, "you did the right thing coming forward. But I need to know, when you escaped, did you see anyone else? Any cars? Neighbors?" "No. Just trees. Snow." He nodded. Then he slid a photograph across the table. Daniel's face stared back at her, not the one she remembered from their calls, but the real one. Older, heavier, eyes sunken with cruelty. "This is him, isn't it?" Her breath caught. "Yes." Rowan tapped the edge of the photo. "His name isn't Daniel." Lydia blinked. "What?" "His real name's Mark Benton. He's wanted in 2 other states, similar pattern. Online deception. False identities. Assault." The room tilted for a second. Everything she had believed about their months together, the tender words, the shared plans, the promise of love, dissolved into something ugly and hollow. "You mean he never," she started, voice breaking. "No," Rowan said carefully. "He never worked overseas. Never lost a wife. It was all a setup." Her chest felt tight, her pulse racing. "He said he loved me." "People like him say anything," Rowan replied. "It's control. That's what he wanted." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the low hum of the lights filled the air. Then Lydia looked up. "Is he still out there?" Rowan hesitated, just enough for her to see the truth before he said it. "We haven't found him yet." A chill crawled down her spine. Her hands tightened around the coffee cup until it shook. "You think he's looking for me," she whispered. "We'll protect you," Rowan said, though his tone betrayed the uncertainty he couldn't hide. "But I need every detail, anything you remember." Words he used. Things he touched. Anything. Lydia's mind flashed through fragments. The smell of gasoline, the sound of the lock clicking, his humming, an old country song he used to whistle while watching her. "He had a scar," she said suddenly, "on his wrist. Faded but long. He said it was from a car crash." Rowan wrote it down. That might help. She looked past him, to the narrow window where dawn light bled faintly through the blinds. Her body felt weightless, as if floating between fear and exhaustion. "I escaped once," she thought. "But this isn't over." Rowan gathered his papers, standing. "We'll be in touch. Try to rest." When the door shut behind him, Lydia stared at the photograph again. Mark Benton. Not Daniel. Not love. Just a lie that had nearly killed her. But as the red camera light blinked in the corner, she suddenly realized someone else was still watching. And this time, it didn't feel like the police. Lydia hadn't touched her phone since the night she ran. The device lay sealed in a plastic evidence bag beside her hospital bed, cracked screen, smeared with dried mud, the final remnant of a love that never existed. But now, 3 days after the interrogation, Detective Rowan insisted she take it back. "We've cloned everything," he'd said. "You can use it again if you're ready." Ready. That word meant nothing to her anymore. The nurses said she should rest, that she was safe under police protection, but Lydia knew better. Safety was just a word people used to make silence less frightening. That night, the hospital was dim and quiet. Machines hummed softly. The storm outside brushed snow against the window pane. Lydia sat upright in bed, staring at the phone. Finally, she pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, the familiar blue glow washing over her face. Notifications flooded in, bank alerts, old voicemails, and messages from coworkers who had long given up hope of hearing from her. She scrolled through them numbly, until one name stopped her cold. Daniel. Her breath hitched. The profile picture was gone, just a gray silhouette, but the name was still there. One unread message glowed at the top. "You shouldn't have left." Her fingers trembled. The timestamp was today, 11:42 p.m. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 11:46, 4 minutes ago. Lydia's stomach twisted. Her first instinct was to call Rowan, but she hesitated. What if it was just an old message syncing late? What if she sounded paranoid? She opened the thread. The rest of the conversation was blank. Every old message, months of late-night confessions and promises, had vanished. Only this new one remained. "You shouldn't have left." Her hands felt numb. She quickly turned off the screen and pressed the phone to her chest. But the damage was already done. Her heart was racing, memories clawing back. The smell of his cologne, the sound of his laugh, the feel of his hand locking around her wrist. Moments later, her phone vibrated again. Then again. She forced herself to look. A new message appeared. "Do you miss me?" Her body went cold. She whispered, barely audible, "No, no, you can't." The screen flickered, a static glitch across the display. For a second, she thought she saw something. His face, distorted, pixelated, bleeding through the black background. Then it was gone. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She hit the nurse's call button, but no one came. The hall outside was silent. She got out of bed, gripping the 4-pole for balance, and went to the small desk by the window. She pulled open the drawer and found the hospital's landline. Her fingers shook as she dialed Detective Rowan's number. He answered on the second ring, groggy. "Rowan." "It's Lydia," she whispered. "He's texting me." There was a pause. "That's impossible. His accounts are deactivated. We traced everything. He's using the same number." She heard typing on the other end, fast, anxious. "Stay where you are," he said finally. "We'll trace the signal." The call ended. Lydia sank into the chair, clutching the phone. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the world seemed too quiet, as if holding its breath. Minutes passed. Then, suddenly, another message appeared. You told them about me. She dropped the phone. The sound echoed in the sterile room. When she reached down to pick it up, the next line was already there, typing dots flickering before it appeared fully. I'm closer than you think. The screen went black. Lydia stared at her reflection in the dark glass, her pulse racing. Behind her, the hallway light flickered once, faintly, then steadied again. Somewhere deep down, she realized something horrifying. Maybe Daniel wasn't sending those messages. Maybe someone else was keeping him alive. Digitally, deliberately. And if that was true, it meant the hunt had just begun. 6 months later, Lydia sat in the front row of the courtroom, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The scent of disinfectant and cheap perfume clung to the air, a strange blend of order and fear. She hadn't slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those words flash again across her phone screen. I'm closer than you think. Detective Rowan had told her to trust the system, to let justice do its work. But justice, Lydia was learning, was slow and cruel in its own way. Across the room, the man once known to her as Daniel sat at the defense table. Mark Benton, his real name. His hair was shorter now, his face clean-shaven, but the eyes were the same. Empty. Mocking. When he turned, their gazes met. Lydia froze. For a split second, he smiled, not the fake, charming grin she remembered from their first meeting, but something colder. Like he was already enjoying the ending. He's doing it again, she whispered to Rowan beside her. Don't react, he murmured. Let him show himself. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Valdez, stood and began outlining the case. Her voice was firm, steady, rehearsed, describing how Benton had catfished multiple women using stolen photos, how his manipulation had turned violent when Lydia discovered the truth. Every word cut through Lydia like glass. She kept her gaze fixed on the wooden table before her, tracing invisible circles with her finger, anything to avoid looking at him again. But she could feel his stare. When Valdez displayed a photograph of the cabin, the snow-covered roof, the shattered window, Lydia's breath caught. The courtroom lights seemed too bright, the walls too close. Mrs. Hill, Valdez said gently, can you identify this location? Lydia nodded slowly. That's where he kept me. And this. The next photo appeared, her torn nightgown, blood-stained at the collar. The jurors shifted uncomfortably. Lydia swallowed hard, her throat tightening. Yes, she whispered. That's mine. Benton didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still, his lips curled in what almost looked like pity. Hours passed like days. Witnesses testified, digital forensics experts detailed how Benton's accounts were linked to multiple victims. One by one, the pieces aligned, until Lydia began to believe maybe, just maybe, it would end here. But then the defense attorney stood. A tall man with a slick voice, practiced in the art of poison. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, what we have here is not a monster. We have a man, a lonely man, who made mistakes. Lydia's stomach churned. The alleged victim, he continued, gesturing toward her, maintained communication with my client for months. She traveled willingly. She exchanged personal photos. She confessed love. Now, because she feels shame, she calls it coercion. The words slammed into her like blows. She wanted to scream, to stand and shout that love and fear can live in the same body, but her voice was gone. When the defense showed the printed messages between her and Daniel, the courtroom seemed to dissolve around her. On the screen, her own words appeared, I can't wait to be in your arms. You make me feel alive again. Her reflection stared back at her from the glossy surface of the evidence monitor. It felt like looking in a mirror, at a version of herself she no longer recognized. The trial and the mirror, she thought. Both showing me things I wish I'd never seen. Her tears fell silently. By evening, court recessed. Rowan helped her outside, away from the reporters and flashing cameras. The sky was a bruised gray, heavy with the promise of rain. You did good today, Rowan said quietly. It doesn't feel like it, she murmured. He looked at me like he still owned me. He doesn't, Rowan said. But his voice didn't sound certain. She paused by the glass doors of the courthouse, staring at her reflection in the dark window. For a moment, it wavered, and in the shimmer of the rain, she thought she saw his face beside hers. She blinked. It was gone. But deep in her chest, the fear stirred again. The trial wasn't over. And neither, it seemed, was his reach. Rain tapped against the apartment window, soft and steady, like a clock marking the time she'd lost. The trial was still ongoing, but Lydia hadn't been called back to testify again. Not yet. The prosecutor said they had new evidence, something digital, but it would take time to verify. That was all she seemed to have now. Endless hours that echoed too loudly. Lydia sat at her kitchen table, a single lamp spilling gold light over a sheet of paper. In front of her was a blank page, beside it an old fountain pen. Her hand trembled slightly as she began to write. Dear Daniel, or Mark, or whoever you really are. The first line bled into the paper. She hesitated, staring at the name, the lie that had shaped her life. I've tried to hate you. Some days I manage. But most nights I just feel empty. Because the person I loved never existed. She paused. Her reflection in the window stared back, older, thinner, eyes dulled by months of courtrooms and sleepless nights. You made me believe I was special. That I mattered. That maybe, after 57 years, love could still find me. I didn't realize it wasn't love that found me. It was you. Her pen scratched softly across the paper. The sound reminded her of his whisper, smooth, convincing, rehearsed. You taught me that monsters don't always hide in shadows. Sometimes, they wear kindness like a mask. She stopped again, hands shaking. Her phone buzzed beside her, a message from Detective Rowan. Rowan, call me when you can. We found something. Her breath caught. She stared at the message but didn't call yet. Not yet. She needed to finish this, even if she never sent it. I thought surviving you meant I'd won. But lately, I've realized survival isn't the end. It's the beginning of learning who I am without you. Lightning flashed outside, a brief flare of white across her reflection. For a heartbeat she saw him there, behind her, smiling that same false smile. She blinked hard, and the image was gone. The world sees me as a victim. I hate that word. Because it means you still define me. But you don't. Not anymore. I do. Her pen slowed. She looked down at what she had written, half confession, half farewell. She signed the bottom softly, Lydia Hill. A knock startled her. 3 quick raps against the door. She froze. It was late. She slipped the letter under a folder, stood quietly and walked to the peephole. Rowan. His trench coat was soaked, rain dripping from his hair. She opened the door. You scared me. Sorry, he said, stepping in. Didn't want to talk over the phone. He set a flash drive on the table. We found this hidden in Benton's old cloud storage. It's not just him. There are dozens of women. Messages, photos, everything. Lydia stared at the small device, her pulse quickening. You mean he did this before? And maybe after, Rowan said grimly. Some of these timestamps are recent. Her stomach dropped. Recent? We think someone else had access to his accounts. Maybe helping him. Maybe continuing them. The sound of rain grew louder. Lydia looked down at the sealed letter beneath the folder, her unfinished goodbye now trembling under the draft from the open door. So it's not over, she said quietly. Rowan shook his head. No. But we'll get whoever's behind this. I promise. She managed a weak smile. Promises don't mean much anymore. When he left, she returned to the table. The letter stared up at her, words of grief and release, but now they felt incomplete. She folded it gently and slipped it into an envelope without sealing it. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Lydia pressed her palm against the cool window pane, watching lightning fracture the night sky. Her reflection looked back at her, tired, fragile, but alive. Maybe one day, she thought, I'll send it. When I finally believe it's over. But deep down, she already knew the truth. Some stories don't end with letters. They end with what comes after the silence. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. Lydia woke to its rhythm, a dull percussion against the window that reminded her of footsteps, steady, inescapable. For a long time, she lay still, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying Rowan's words from the night before. Someone else had access to his accounts. That phrase wouldn't leave her. She rose slowly, made coffee, and sat at the table where the flash drive still lay beside her unfinished letter. The envelope looked pale in the morning light, its edges curling slightly from the damp air. She ran her fingers over it, then pushed it aside. It wasn't time for goodbyes. Not yet. When Rowan called at noon, his tone was clipped but careful. "Lydia, I need you to come in. We've verified some of the data. You'll want to see this." 2 hours later, she was back in the small, gray-walled investigation room that had started to feel like an annex to her memory. The hum of computers, the faint smell of old coffee, everything felt cold, mechanical, unreal. Rowan was already there, hunched over a laptop, his expression unreadable. He glanced up when she entered. "You okay?" "That depends," she said, folding her arms. "What did you find?" He turned the screen toward her. Dozens of folders filled the display, each named after a woman. Photos, messages, and recordings scrolled by as he clicked through. Lydia recognized some of the usernames from the trial exhibits. Others were new. But then, one folder made her chest tighten. "Wait, go back," she said. "That one. Eleanor under score 57. Rowan opened it. Inside were chat logs, dated months after Mark Benton's arrest. The tone was familiar, tender, flattering, manipulative. The man used the same phrases, the same rhythm, the same false warmth. "He's still messaging them?" Lydia whispered. "That's impossible," Rowan said. "Benton's in custody. He's had no internet access for over a year." "Then who's doing this?" Rowan hesitated, then clicked a metadata file. The messages were sent from an IP address located in Willow Heights, the same suburb where Benton's sister lives. Lydia froze. "His sister? You think she's involved?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her a printed photo. It showed a woman in her 30s, dark hair pulled into a bun, wearing a nursing uniform. The name tag read Clara Benton. "She visited him every week," Rowan said quietly. "And from what we can tell, she had access to his laptop before we seized it." Lydia's pulse quickened. So she continued what he started? Maybe. Or maybe she was the one helping him all along. The air in the room thickened. Lydia's gaze fell back to the folder names, the women, the lies, the patterns. Clara had used her brother's style, his voice. Even his words of comfort. It wasn't just deception, it was devotion twisted into something cruel. Why would she do that? Lydia asked softly. Rowan leaned back. "We think it was obsession. Maybe protection. There are emails where she defends him, calls him misunderstood. In one draft she wrote." He paused, reading from a printed note. "They ruined his life. They turned him into a monster because they couldn't see the love beneath the lies." Lydia shivered. "Love?" she repeated. "She calls that love?" Rowan looked at her with quiet empathy. People justify anything when they can't face what's real. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the computer filled the silence, punctuated by rain hitting the windows. Finally, Rowan exhaled. "There's more. The last login, it came from a device registered under your name." Lydia blinked. "What?" "Your name, your old email address, the one connected to Benton's first messages. We think she cloned your identity. She's been using your digital footprint to talk to new victims." The room tilted. Lydia grabbed the edge of the table. "So somewhere out there women think they're talking to me?" "To your name, yes," Rowan said. "To the woman who survived him." A nauseating mix of anger and fear surged through her. She stood abruptly. "Then she's trying to erase me. To turn my story into his legacy." Rowan nodded grimly. "We can stop her. But we need you to testify again. This time, not just against him, against her." Lydia stared at the laptop screen, at the endless trail of lies and stolen voices. For months, she had tried to reclaim her identity. Now someone had taken it again, twisted it into a weapon. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "Tell me what I have to do." Rowan closed the laptop. "We'll bring her in tomorrow." As Lydia left the station, The rain had stopped. The clouds were still heavy, but a pale slit of light cut through the horizon. For the first time in weeks, she didn't flinch at her reflection in the glass doors. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting back. But deep inside she knew this wasn't over. Because somewhere in the quiet, a new message was waiting to be sent. The next morning, the police station smelled faintly of rain and burnt coffee. Lydia arrived early, her nerves steady but her heartbeat quick. She wore no makeup, her gray hair tied back, her expression calm, almost clinical. She dressed the way she used to before a long night shift at the hospital, armor in routine. Detective Rowan greeted her with a nod. "She's here," he said quietly. "We brought her in at dawn." "Clara Benton?" Lydia asked, her voice even. He hesitated. "She's been cooperative so far. Says she just wants to explain." Lydia followed him down the corridor toward the interview room. Her steps echoed, hollow, rhythmic, precise. As they neared the door, she caught her reflection in the narrow glass window. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw another woman staring back, frightened, frail, the woman she used to be. Then she blinked, and that ghost was gone. Inside the room, Clara sat with her hands folded on the table. She looked younger than Lydia expected, early 30s maybe, pale skin, dark eyes that darted up and then down again. The resemblance to her brother was unmistakable, the same sharp jawline, the same unsettling calm. "Lydia," Clara said softly as Lydia entered. "I've heard so much about you." Lydia didn't sit right away. "You should have. You used my name." Clara smiled faintly. "Only because people trusted you. They believed in you. I thought, maybe if I used your name, they'd listen to me too." "You mean they'd fall for you," Lydia corrected. "Like I did for him." Clara flinched, just barely. Rowan leaned against the wall, silent, letting the tension breathe. The recorder on the table blinked red. "He wasn't a monster," Clara whispered. "He was lonely. The women he spoke to, they wanted love, same as you did. You all made him feel important again." Lydia's jaw tightened. "He made us feel safe before he destroyed us. There's a difference." Clara's lips trembled, her voice rising. "You don't understand. He loved you, Lydia. He told me. Every time I visited, he said your name. Said you were the only one who really saw him." The words cut deep, not because Lydia believed them, but because a small, exhausted part of her once had. She leaned forward. "Then why did he lock me in that room? Why did he—" She stops herself, breath shaking. "Don't you dare call that love." Clara's expression cracked, a thin fissure of rage beneath the softness. "You ruined him," she hissed. "After everything he gave you, you turned the world against him. I was just trying to make them see." "By pretending to be me?" Lydia's tone was low, controlled. "By finding more women to hurt?" Silence. Clara's hands fidgeted in her lap. Then she said, almost to herself, "He didn't ask me to. I just couldn't stop. I wanted to fix his story." Lydia's gaze softened, not with pity but with clarity. "You didn't want to fix him, Clara. You wanted to be him." The younger woman froze. The truth hung between them, cold, sharp, undeniable. Rowan stepped forward, ending the recording. "That's enough for today." As Clara was escorted out, she turned one last time toward Lydia. "He loved you," she said again, her voice trembling. "That's why you'll never really escape him." Lydia watched her go, her face unreadable. Then she exhaled, long and slow, as the door shut behind them. That evening, Lydia sat alone in her apartment. The letter she'd never sent still lay on the table, the ink slightly faded. She picked it up one last time and unfolded it. "You told me I made you feel alive. But I was the one learning what survival meant." She added one final line beneath it. "And now I choose to live, without your shadow." She folded the paper neatly and slipped it into the envelope. This time, she didn't seal it. Instead, she walked to the mirror across the room. Her reflection looked back, older, steadier, no longer haunted. For the first time, she saw not a victim, not a survivor, but a woman who had reclaimed her voice. She placed the letter on the table beside the mirror and turned off the light. The city outside glowed faintly, its noise distant, like another world. Her phone buzzed once, a new message. For a moment, her heart skipped. Then she looked at the screen. Unknown number, you don't know me, but your story saved my life. Lydia stared at the message for a long moment, tears welling quietly in her eyes. This time, she didn't delete it. She typed back, slowly, deliberately. You're not alone. None of us are. She set the phone down, closed her eyes, and let the silence settle, deep, clean, and final. End of story.